You likely heard the news, Sony is not at E3 2019 and that is huge, but what does it mean for their upcoming exclusives, especially Horizon Zero Dawn 2, because that is by far my most anticipated game at this point. Also, will that game have multiplayer? Well, there are some interesting things going on at Guerrilla Games, so we will talk about that, and also the potential PlayStation 5 release date that is maybe sooner than you might expect. So a ton to discuss, let's get into it. If you enjoy that, then a like would be super appreciated, and let's go. So yes, the biggest gaming convention, E3, will be really different in 2019, with Sony not having any presence or press conference there. For reference, this was Sony's space at E3 2018. Like, who is going to fill all that and then expect to leave the next year in 2020 when Sony will likely return? Because the reason they are skipping E3 is not because the convention is dying or anything. No, I think it's because they have nothing new to share. This year's E3 press conference was pretty bare bones, with a focus on 4 exclusives that were already announced the years before. Ghost of Tsushima, Death Stranding, The Last of Us Part 2, and of course Spider-Man, with no real big Sony first-party announcements. Then Sony cancelled PlayStation Experience 2018 that normally takes place in December and also has a show with announcements of some sort. Reason for the cancellation was because they would not have enough to bring a lot of people together in a location in North America to have that event. And I think they have a similar reason for skipping E3 2019 as well. They don't have any new PlayStation 4 projects to announce and already showed their big upcoming games many times before. So going to E3 with Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2 and Death Stranding again in 2019 without any new announcements would only cause a lot of criticism and hurt those really promising looking games. Like, I can't wait to see more from these games for sure, but repeating the same sort of show they did this year that was not really beloved is just not a great move. So with this Sony skipping E3 2019 announcements, I think we can be pretty sure that Horizon Zero Dawn 2, that is of course totally in development, is a PlayStation 5 exclusive. If they had a PlayStation 4 version of that game in development right now, they would have shown that at either PlayStation Experience this year or E3 2019. Because you want to push that before you talk about the PlayStation 5 that launches in 2020, maybe even early 2020, more on that a little later in the video. So if there was a PlayStation 4 version of the next Horizon, something I first thought would happen because it means that way more people will get their hands on the game, giving the franchise way more growth potential than being on a new platform with just a few million units sold. Anyway, if there was a PS4 version, then they would have that big announcement that they say they now don't have. Then an E3 2019 presence would have made sense if they got a big surprise. Like if you would combine that with new looks at the upcoming PS4 exclusives we already know about, and third-party announcements and trailers from Activision with Call of Duty and Destiny 2, Capcom always announced their game on the Sony stage. Like last year they had Resident Evil 2 Remake, and we saw Monster Hunter World and Resident Evil 7 the years before for the first time on the Sony stage. Sony could also have shown Nioh 2 they announced this year, some PlayStation VR things, Rocksteady's next project maybe, and show a Ubisoft game like Watch Dogs 3, that series has been PlayStation branded before, and then bam, you got a pretty solid show. Side note, I'm really curious where these third-party developers that have deals with Sony will now go at E3 2019. Like if the rumored Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4 has still the PlayStation deal, then it will not be at Xbox. So will that game and the potential Destiny 2 expansion, maybe a new Crash Bandicoot game, then not be shown during any press conference, or will Activision maybe hold their own event? And the absence of Sony also ends the Capcom streak of showing their games first on the Sony stage, but they could of course go to Xbox like they did with Devil May Cry 5 this year. So yeah, I totally believe that if Horizon Zero Dawn 2 was a PS4 game, then Sony would have gotten a pretty solid E3 2019 show. Okay, not a 2015 or 2016 hype level show, where they showcased Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War for the first time respectively, alongside the return of many nostalgic and then unbelievable projects like the return of Crash, The Lost Guardian and Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, not a show like that, but if Sony had an unannounced PS4 game in development from one of these big studios, then E3 would have made sense. Now they're skipping it, so I think that all their unannounced games they have in development right now at Guerrilla Games, Sony Japan Studio and Polyphony Digital, of course, from the Gran Turismo series, are for the PlayStation 5. And it makes sense as well. Sony won this console generation. They will go past the 100 million units sold for the PS4 and don't need any more new titles to push the hardware of the PlayStation 4. so they can better give you a good reason to jump on the next platform with exclusives like Horizon Zero Dawn 2. Like the first Horizon is still one of the best looking games out there. Imagine a sequel that is only on PlayStation 5. Guerrilla Games could really go all out and would not have to worry about the older PS4 hardware. Having that as a PlayStation 5 showcase title is of course insane. And let's not forget that the PlayStation 4 has some amazing exclusives still on the horizon, like Ghost of Tsushima, Death Stranding and The Last of Us Part 2. And they might get a PlayStation 5 version as well. This is according to leaker Rutenic Cookie 4, who said that Sony would not be at E3 the day before it was officially announced, saying that he has a friend who has connections in the business. So he then later made some more comments with interesting info, but remember that this is of course still a rumor and that things can change all the time as well. But he is more credible now for sure. Like, who would have predicted that Sony would announce their absence in November, more than half a year before the E3. So the interesting things he notes about the PlayStation 5 is that Sony is now planning to release a small bit of information at an early mid-2019 event, with more at the PlayStation Experience in 2019, so that would be December 2019. And that would mean that a PlayStation 5 release in the fall of 2020 would be way too late. Like, you don't want to announce your new console a year and a half before it comes out. The leaker notes that right now they want to release the PlayStation 5 in March 2020, but it might get pushed to November 2020. Like, November makes way more sense, of course, looking at the release window of the previous PlayStations, but early 2020 is also possible, I think. Nintendo showed with the Switch that it's totally not weird to have a launch in March and have it do well as well. And they also really started talking about this system at the end of 2016 with an early 2017 push followed by a March release. And it really worked out for them, and I also think that it does not matter whether PlayStation 5 will launch, it will be sold out for the first few months anyway, with a ton of hardcore people buying it day one. More things that point towards an early 2020 release for the PlayStation 5 is Infinity Ward, the Call of Duty developer that will release the next Call of Duty game, rumored to be Modern Warfare 4, in 2019. They posted a job listing asking for people to work on a next-gen title. Again, they're going to release their game in 2019, so why is it a next-gen game then? Well, it makes sense if the PlayStation 5 will indeed be launched in March 2020, because then this game needs a next-gen version as well. If the PlayStation 5 was a fall 2020 console, then it doesn't make sense that Infinity Ward is making a next-gen version. That would be up to Sledgehammer that will release their Call of Duty game in the fall of 2020. And I don't know if an early 2020 release for the PlayStation 5 means that Horizon Zero Dawn 2 is an early 2020 game as well. It would be 3 years after the first game, so possible on paper, although we have to factor in the release of the Frozen Wilds DLC that many people on the team worked on instead of the sequel as well, I would imagine. And having an early 2020 release for the PlayStation 5 also means that you might not need Horizon 2 at launch, because the release will overlap with PlayStation 4 exclusives that still need to come out, like The Last of Us Part 2, Death Stranding, and I totally think that both are 2020 games. Maybe even Ghost of Tsushima as well, that was 55% in development at E3 this year, so would not be surprised if at least 2 of these games have a PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 version at the same time. Like, at this point, Sony cannot make them a PlayStation 5 exclusive comparable to what Nintendo did with Breath of the Wild. It was announced as a Wii U game before the Switch was a thing, so you can't take it away from that platform. And yeah, having The Last of Us Part 2 as a launch game on the PlayStation 5 is still huge, even if you have a PlayStation 4 version as well. That is also what Breath of the Wild showed. People did not care and mostly bought the game on the Nintendo Switch. So yeah, Sony might not need Horizon Zero Dawn 2 at launch, giving Guerrilla Games more development time that is maybe needed for a multiplayer mode. Like, very interesting stuff happened recently. Guerrilla Games namely hired 2 people with multiplayer shooter experience. Chris Lee, who is now a principal game designer since October for an unannounced game, worked as an online and multiplayer designer on Rainbow Six Siege for more than 3 years. And Simon also joined. He was a game director on Watch Dogs 2, Rainbow Six Siege, and also worked on Killzone 2 back in the day. He's now a game director at Guerrilla Games working on a secret game. So yes, 2 big hires with a lot of multiplayer experience. This could mean 2 things. The next Horizon Zero Dawn game is getting multiplayer, or Guerrilla Games is working on a new online shooter alongside Horizon Zero Dawn 2, and I think the latter makes way more sense. I mean, both new hires have a lot of experience with online shooters, and it looks like Matthijs de Jonge, the game director on the first Horizon, is still the game director on his next project, while Simon is a game director too. Like, not sure if you can have two game directors on one project, unless the multiplayer is like its own project. But no, while co-op was first planned for Horizon in the early stages, I think it's pretty clear that they want to focus on making an immersive world with a focus on story. And job postings on Guerrilla's website also kind of suggest that. Right now, for example, we got one up for a senior AI programmer who will work with animators to make characters come to life through believable and fluid emotions, showing the focus on cutscenes with the characters you will encounter in the world, or the senior character animator who is needed to create immersive and believable behaviors for our background characters. So it sounds like Horizon 2 will likely be a giant leap for the series while remaining single player. So I'm more leaning towards them making some sort of multiplayer only shooter or something. Killzone Battle Royale, anyone? Sony likes to jump on trends with their own studios as well, as we saw this generation, for example, with many failed free-to-play games they released. MOBAs, All-Stars Battle Royale on the PS3, of course, stuff like that. So an exclusive Battle Royale game from Guerrilla Games totally fits that. It would be a cool thing to have at the launch of the PlayStation 5 for sure. Like, Sony likes to have exclusive first-person shooters at the launch of their console. Look at Resistance on the PS3 or Killzone Shadowfall for the PS4. Maybe Guerrilla Games is also making a shooter fix for the launch of the PlayStation 5. Whatever Guerrilla Games is up to, they are growing. They are moving into a way bigger building in early 2019, as I also mentioned in a previous video. Going from 250 to 400 full-time workers, although they have way more than 250 if I recall correctly right now. So they're likely expanding the amount of projects they work on as well. And they've done that before, like Killzone Shadowfall was made while a smaller group of people was working on Horizon. But now they have a full team on Horizon 2, I would imagine, and maybe another smaller team on something else. This multiplayer shooter. Guerrilla Games wants to release games every 2 or 3 years, so I still think that Horizon 2 is slated for 2020, likely the first year of the PlayStation 5. So yeah, will Sony release the PlayStation 5 in early 2020 or fall 2020 as the leaker notes? By the way, he also said that Anthem is getting delayed again because it's a mess right now, so if that turns out to be correct, then we know that this leak is even more credible. Either way, one big takeaway from this video is that Sony is gearing up for a 2019 announcement for the PlayStation 5. They were also looking for a senior project manager to own the roadmap for the next generation PlayStation campaign. I mean, why hire someone in October of this year if you will not tease the PlayStation 5 till 2020? And more signs point towards this early 2020 release. I can totally see that happen. Either way, Horizon Zero Dawn 2 in 2019, I think it's like a sure thing that we will see that game in a teaser trailer or maybe gameplay already. And when we do, I will of course cover everything here as you come to expect from me. So totally subscribe for everything Horizon Zero Dawn 2, the PlayStation 5. I still think that first Horizon Zero Dawn 2 trailer will be Aloy jumping off a mountain and then flying away on a Stormbird. Like, something like that to tease the fly feature. We will see. Like this video to support the channel. Check out my video on PSN name change that is coming. I got everything in that video. And I will of course speak to you next time. Goodbye.